Welcome to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Beetlejuice will forever hold a very special place in my heart. It wasn't only my quintessential gateway horror movie, but it shaped a lifelong, unapologetic appreciation for all things weird and macabre. The movie had a lightning-in-a-bottle combination of a devilishly rebellious spirit and just a singularity of vision that introduced the world to the wonders of Tim Burton. It was and forever will be an iconic and magical movie. Every Saturday morning, Beetlejuice was my go-to cartoon, and my VHS of the movie practically melted from being watched so much. I had the Halloween costume as a child and as a grown-up, and at the age of 6 years old, I got a timeout for making my Beetlejuice action figure say, "Nice fucking model," in the first grade. Needless to say, Beetlejuice is a part of me. The movie is just as sacred to countless others for the same reasons, which is probably why the Beetlejuice sequels and remakes have remained in production hell for decades. How can you possibly reimagine a classic that means so much to so many people? The answer is turn it into a musical. Despite being a little apprehensive at first, what struck me within the first 10 minutes of Beetlejuice the Musical was that it was developed with a tremendous amount of love and respect for the original movie. The show encompasses all of the many facets of what made the movie so great, while expanding on the story in ways that are equal parts inventive and reverential. It even has several nods to the cartoon, which just plain made me happy. This is a killer show, and I urge you to go see it. The costumes, the music, the humor, and the insanely elaborate Burton-esque sets and visuals are an overwhelming and straight-up blissful experience for fans of the original. Plus, the anarchistic spirit of lewdness and rudeness from the original movie is retained in full force. I don't know what else to say other than Beetlejuice the Musical is downright fucking awesome, and it completely floored me. I was so blown away by this musical, I was really looking forward to talking to these guys. So without further ado, here is Scott Brown and Anthony King, the writers of Beetlejuice the Musical. Huge, tremendous congratulations on Beetlejuice the Musical. I was lucky enough to get to see it in previews and was totally blown away.
Oh, great.
This was an IP that's been very close to my heart since I was a child. It literally is part of my identity. It's weird. I'm that close to Beetlejuice.
Is this where you pull up your pants and we see the striped socks?
Yes. Just my whole leg is tattooed with Beetlejuice stripes. Yeah. I have Deo tattooed on my ass. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people like me who really loved the movie and it meant so much to them. Was it intimidating to approach such a beloved IP?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, we also love it. So I think I guess we decided early on, like, there were some things that we thought were untouchable and we had to just completely grab onto and go, this is what Beetlejuice is. And then we felt like there were things that we could like repurpose, but still honor. And then there were things that we were like, we wanted to change, not because we don't like the movie, but because early on it was decided that Lydia was going to be the main character of the musical, and she's obviously not the main character of the movie, and so things had to shift around, to tell that story. But we wanted to keep the spirit of Tim Burton, the spirit of Beetlejuice, especially the character, while not just having a Michael Keaton impression. Because obviously his genius is such a huge part of that character.
No, of course.
Yeah.
I got into a conversation with my girlfriend after we saw the musical. Like, who else could have played Beetlejuice in the movie? I came up with Jack Nicholson. That could have been
that would have been fascinating. That would have been fascinating.
Yeah. That was such a weird. I remember like being that age and like when they announced that Keaton was going to be Batman, being so surprised because I didn't know Keaton. I mean, I was relatively young and I didn't know Keaton from any of his other work other than like Beetlejuice, basically. I don't think I'd even...
Mr. Mom. You love Mr. Mom.
I did love Mr. Mom. I was like, I want to be that guy. But it was, I mean, it was when they announced that, and it was almost like when you saw it was Keaton and Nicholson in Batman, it was almost kind of like, wait, wasn't he just basically a Jack Nicholson crazy guy kind of character in this other movie? It was. I remember thinking like, oh, that's so weird.
Yeah,
but
yeah. I mean, with that in mind, I got to say, it was so clear that the property was in very loving hands.
Oh,
it
good.
was so clear.
Oh, great.
Because I mean, you go to something like this. This is a meaningful story to a lot of people, and the minute before the curtain comes up, there's that tinge of anxiety, like, oh shit, what if they don't? What if they don't do it? But I literally was moved to tears at how awesome it was and how celebratory it was. It was just so blissful for me as a Beetlejuice fan, and a horror fan, and a Broadway fan. So again, huge bravo to both you guys. It was,
thank you.
so much fun.
I mean, that means a lot that people who love the movie also like the show, because I mean, we'd be devastated if people I love the movie and you ruined it. It would be so horrifying.
It would not be. I mean, just like our sense memory of Beetlejuice is so strong. I think that's also what we wanted, and it just kind of like the feelings that Beetlejuice evoked, even if like specific plot points and structures have to change because it's a musical, because it's on stage, because because Lydia is the main character and the Lydia Beetlejuice dynamic is what we're trying to foreground. When those things change, we hope we can just preserve kind of that feeling that we had when we were like 12 or 13 years old and just loving this kind of celebration of anarchy and unexpected emotion and and kind of like the triumph of weird people sort of
Well, how did you guys approach that? Like, what were the steps in from day one when you knew you were doing it? How did you approach the story? What was the research process? How did you figure out what you wanted to cover and what you were going to do?
The first thing was we decided Lydia was going to be the main character, and we wanted Beetlejuice, who's only in the movie for like 12 minutes.
Seriously, it's like 12 or 13.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's crazy.
He's barely in the movie, and so we decided we wanted them to kind of be dual protagonists and antagonists, and so then everything kind of shifted around that, and so we had to ask questions that aren't really explained in the movie, like what is Beetlejuice doing?
Right.
Why is he there? Like, in the movie, he's just hanging out in the model, and he wants to scare people, but getting a little more like kind of like understanding of where that's coming from and why he wants all of that, and because in a musical people have to sing, so there's a little bit more emotional depth you just have to mine for characters to make a musical.
It's just so funny. Things are so much more literal on stage too, because when you say something, it's like, what's Beetlejuice doing? Oh, he's hanging out in a model. It's like, well, where is he standing? What does that mean? Like spatially, what does that? I mean, so those things become so concrete that like you can't elide the sort of logic of things.
Not to mention it's hard to zoom into a model on stage.
Right.
So,
and we tried to move the whole theater closer.
The model was one of the first things that went.
No, we never tried.
The model was one of the first things that we kind of were like, I think we have to move away from that idea, even though, because part of it for me was that also the look of the model in the movie is so great and also already looks like a set, that it's like, if we put that on stage, are we just copying the movie? In a way, and so it was like, well, maybe we grabbed onto this idea of the house being the kind of central thing and it changing multiple times through the show, as our kind of like leading visual cue instead of that.
It made sense. There's a lot of things that were streamlined, like they died in the house, which I thought made perfect sense. Like, how are you going to do?
Yeah,
exactly.
No, it's like your Miss Saigon covered bridge thing is going to come down, and we're going to drive an actual car off. And we've already spent $75 million in the first 3 minutes.
No, but I'm sure that allows you to mine other material that wasn't covered in the movie, like you'd said before, that was the most fascinating thing about it. Is it rounded out I thought it added depth to the movie, because it's these things that you just didn't think about with the movie. Like,
and another influence that we thought a lot about while we were making the show was the Beetlejuice cartoon.
I was going to bring that up. I noticed that
because we watched that a lot as kids, and in that Beetlejuice and Lydia are like pals. He's almost like her magical pet, and who's like causing chaos, and so a lot of the second act of the musical is kind of is from that idea of like, now they're together, they're kind of a unit, and then things fall apart. But we wanted that spirit of that as well, which you don't really get. I mean, in the movie they talk twice, I think, and then he tries to marry her.
Right.
Yeah. It is strictly an extortion relationship.
Yeah,
right. I mean, like that's,
right.
And people, I think, forget that because they did see the cartoon afterwards where they were kind of pals and Beetlejuice was a little bit harmless, and they think back on the movie and think, oh yeah, they were kind of hanging out and doing stuff, and you go back and it's like, not at all, really. It's like he is not her friend. It's purely transactional, and then it becomes a huge problem.
Right. Yeah, it was relatively creepy, but yeah,
it's very creepy. Which we try to drive straight into and address.
Right, right. No, it's definitely wise to acknowledge all of that. But the cartoon influence, I totally saw in the second act. One of my favorite scenes is when it's just the two of them in the house together, and then everybody who comes into the house, they're just possessing and messing with.
Yes, yeah.
It was such a fun moment that just broke all the it totally reminded me of the cartoon. And that was so much fun. It was like it's like they're buddies again.
Yeah, that's the most cartoon part of the show for sure.
Yeah, it was really, really cool.
That's great.
How did you guys get involved to begin with Beetlejuice?
So we wrote this very strange show that ran off Broadway called Gutenberg the Musical, and Alex Timbers, who's directing Beetlejuice, directed that. And after we finished that, he was talking to Warner Brothers about doing a show and told them he wanted to do Beetlejuice and he wanted us to write it. And so then we got brought in to like go, here's what we would do with it. And then many years later, here we are.
Very cool.
Yeah.
But it was Alex who kind of brought us in, and and it was, it's been that collaboration from the beginning.
Very cool. And what was the process like in getting this whole thing coming together? I mean, obviously you write the book, and then there's the music, and then there's the design, and then how does that all kind of phase together? Because I'm sure one influences the other. But what was the process of the entire thing coming together?
Well, when we started out, we didn't have a composer. We were just kind of pitching out the story and talking about how we wanted to make it different from the movie, what we wanted to keep from the movie, that kind of stuff. And we would come up with these structures and even full scripts where we would have places in the script where we would say, and then, this is all building up to this song. This is what's going to happen in the song. It's a basic idea. And for a long time, that was the script. It would just have these these little bits of real estate for songs.
Right.
And at the same time, because Alex was involved as a director, we were having conversations with him about the concept of the show and how he was imagining the set. And like I said, this idea of like the house being a central thing, and we're fighting over the house and whose house is it? And so we would write, that would shape how we were writing as well. And then pretty early in the process, Dave Corrins, who did the set, was brought in to also start talking about what's actually possible to transform the set and move to where because there were a lot of different ideas of like how we were going to use the house and what it was going to look like.
And if parts of the house would move around, and if it's like, we'll move a whole floor up here and maybe that's a thing. And, it's for a while, it's kind of the sky's the limit thinking,
it was
which is
kind of
great.
exciting
nice
writing in that way with like thinking
cool.
about the end product at the same time as you're creating it. And then of course, Eddie Perfect came on board to write the songs, and then that became its own collaboration of him writing songs and him writing songs for things we had already pitched, but us also rewriting for ideas he had, and it's been a really great collaboration.
Very cool.
But you're right, it's like all those elements influence each other, and when something else comes and when somebody new comes on board and things start to it has blowback effects into the show, and
And then the actors, I mean, when we started finding our actors and doing workshops with them, I mean, we really because it's comedy, once we had the people we liked, like writing toward what their strengths are too.
Yeah.
For comedy, it was like a big part of it, because and that comes from just like, I have a background in television, and that's so much of what you're doing is like setting up these people to succeed. And so that was all those influences were, and it's just been really kind of exciting to take this giant pot of people to make this show.
Yeah.
That's super cool. And you guys have been collaborators for a long time, right?
Yeah. We've known each other since 8th grade.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Practically since about when Beetlejuice came out or something. I mean, like it was not long after
when
that.
You're looking at each other like, one day we're going to make a music.
It was like a master plan. We cut our palms and took an oath and said, someday we'll write a Beetlejuice musical.
That's right.
It was like, that's so, do that, kids.
Well, I feel like it's rare to have writers who are such close collaborators. What are the keys to your long-standing collaboration?
I would say shorthand and the ability to kind of like get mad at each other and then drop it immediately.
Yes. That is so crucial. Yes, realizing that, like, I remember once we were talking about was a scene where I won't get into details, but where a magic book was either opened or not opened, and there were various reasons why it could be opened or couldn't be opened, and we had a giant fight about that, and then later just said, it's so great that we just had like a world-ending fight about a magic book that does not exist and why it could open or not open, and here we are having dinner. It's like it's kind
Very
of a
cool.
wipe your feet at the door sort of.
We're essentially like brothers at this point, and so no fight actually is personal at this point.
Right.
So,
Well, that's good.
so
we
can hash
kind of
things
knows
out.
we kind of already know what the other one is gonna like or not like, or be resistant to or
Right.
not resistant. So we there's a little bit of a sense of like, it's like, here's something I know you're gonna love, here's something I know you're gonna hate, but I'm gonna try really hard to get it like as close to the 5-yard line as I can, and then it's
Cool.
Often.
So as you were writing this story, what were some of the kind of alternate plot directions you almost went in that were different from the final product?
I mean, well, there was, because Lydia, the big, Lydia's the main character, and Lydia's mother is dead, which you don't know what happened to her mom in the movie. Delia is actually her stepmom in the movie. It's barely mentioned, but it is there because
There's like one line.
First watch, you kind of are like, is she just calling her mom Delia because
to be
she's
impertinent,
like
to
weird?
be just weird, or just because she's a
Right.
teenager, and but then there's one line, I think, in the scene where Delia's like making dinner or something.
they're
like that.
at the dinner table.
They're at the dinner table, and Delia says something. They say there's an exchange, and I can't actually remember what the actual line is.
So
It suggests
because
I'm not
again
your
it's a
mom.
musical and you have to plumb more emotion. We were like, let's have her mom be dead and then recently dead, so there's more tumult in their lives. So then there was a question of, and then once we decided Lydia was the main character, we wanted Lydia to go to the netherworld, and so then there's the big question of, since she wants to find her mother, does she meet her mother or not?
Right.
And there were many different versions of that. We tried versions where she met her mom. We tried versions where the Maitlands went with her to the netherworld. And ultimately that's not where we landed. But the interesting thing for us was that in trying to write a scene where she's reunited with her mother, which when you hear that, you're like, oh, it's going to be so emotional. It's going to be so great. But what we found, at least in our way of thinking, is like, the truth is when someone dies, you don't get to see them again. Right. And so the pain of that is what's relatable. It's actually not relatable to see them again.
Yeah.
And so there's something just
We're like,
false
why is
about
this?
it.
Why is this
Right.
so hard? Why does this all seem? It's
feels
because
cheesy
we're
and
writing it in
fake.
bad faith.
Yeah.
You're like, I want to
it's
say all the
not-
things I
like-
didn't get to say, and it's like, well, the relatable pain is that you don't get to say those things,
Right.
and you have to let that go and live with it and move on, and then that ended up being like, oh, that's what our show's about,
Right.
And so going down those roads actually helped us
Yeah.
kind of get to where we are. But it was that was a really interesting, because at first blush you're like, it's gonna be so great, she's gonna see her mom again, and then you're like, oh, this isn't good.
Yeah. Now that occurred to me as I was watching it, I kept thinking, is she going to meet her mom? And then she doesn't. Spoiler alert, listeners. But I don't know. It would have been so difficult to do without it coming across as like a little contrite. And I think that sense of loss is way stronger. And it is a show about death.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's exactly
just
right.
perfectly came
and we
full
wanted to be
circle.
a show about like, what do you do once you're in this place of grief? Do
Right.
and that the answer is reaching out to other people and finding a way forward
Mm-hmm.
together. And so we try to set up this thing where like her father's just moving forward on his own.
He's trying to skip over,
and she
the
doesn't,
hard part.
and she's not moving forward.
She's
at
moving
all.
backwards
Yeah.
to how it used to be, and they
Right,
have to
listen to
meet.
the song.
And so the answer is
Yeah.
for them to see each other and go, oh, together we can do this, and we just have to, go through it.
Mm-hmm.
But that is. That was, I think writing the version where she met her mom is how we got to that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's important to go down different plot holes to arrive at your,
for
your
sure.
final
If we
one.
hadn't done that, I think we always would have wondered if I think that would have haunted the show on some
Right.
level. I think we would have thought like, oh, did we just veer away? Maybe there's a really hard but really fulfilling scene we could have found there. But since we did it first, I think we knew it's like, oh, this is a bad faith argument. This is
Right.
not actually what's at issue here.
Right. Were there any ideas or concepts that were or musical numbers or scenes that were particularly hard to cut that you had to cut? Like any really painful ideas that you didn't get to see on the stage?
Many. I mean,
Yeah,
Eddie wrote so many great songs.
Yeah, Eddie's written a lot of
Oh,
great
wow.
numbers. through all of this. That I mean, we've gone through 4 opening numbers.
Yeah,
I think, and some of them I really loved.
Some of them pieces of them have reappeared in other songs and in the opening number. It's fascinating to see how much creative destruction there is in this process.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, we did the show out of town in Washington D.C. and in Washington, in the Netherworld, there was a big boy band number, which I always thought was really fun, but it was very like, what is going on?
Right.
And it was hard to say too, because like it's not like it fell flat. Like audiences really loved that. I mean, we went into it thinking like, this is pretty weird. I don't know if this is really the way to go.
But we couldn't justify why
it
existed, but it was
not
very
at all.
funny.
It's just one of those things that just kind of like happened its way into the show, and we kind of like, and yet it seems so delightful, and everyone likes it so much.
Right.
And then the time came, as it comes for many things, for it to just
And I think Otho at different points had 3 different songs, and like,
oh wow,
yeah.
I mean, there was and some of it is also, I think the first time we ever did a reading of this, the show was like over 3 hours long.
It was so long.
So it was just like packed.
I'm not even sure we got all the way to the end of
Yeah.
it. Like I think at some point they were kind of like, and that's basically the show. Everybody can go home now.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's a process.
Cool. Was there anything interesting that you uncovered in your story research process? Because I know the original script for Beetlejuice, which not a lot of people realize was not Tim Burton's idea.
That's right.
Oh,
he
yeah.
picked it up.
That's very right.
There were some sequel scripts floating around. They were going to do a female Beetlejuice at one point.
Yeah.
What did you guys discover?
The original script is very dark. And like not really comedy even. I mean,
no, I think
there's a little bit of comedy in him, but
sort of an absurd horror kind of.
It's much more horror, and like
Yeah.
he is trying to kill everyone. And I think he kills Lydia.
I think so, or her sister.
Yes, her
'Cause
sister.
she has a sister.
and he kills her sister.
Who is like bitten by a like rabid squirrel or something.
Yeah,
too. I mean,
it's a very crazy
It's
script.
nuts. I mean,
And I tried like crazy because after Beetlejuice was a success, they greenlit Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian,
Right.
Which they never shot, but the script was written, and I tried like crazy to get it, and I've never gotten it because I'm just like, what could that be?
Yeah.
oh man, I would.
I mean, it's like a classic terrible idea for a sequel to a movie.
I think it's amazing you can't find it. I mean,
I've never been able to
I mean,
find it.
I mean, they must have really said. I mean, it's like a day the clown
it's all
cried.
pre-internet. So
it's pre-internet.
I'm
So
sure
so
it's
no,
on
so
paper
someone would have to
somewhere.
scan it.
That's right.
And that like somewhere in a vault next to the
But
day
just
the
the
clown
idea
cried.
that off of Beetlejuice was like he should be
is Beetlejuice
surfing in
Goes
Hawaii
Hawaii.
is just like, oh no.
Where did that come from? Yeah.
And there's a reason why it's never made. And then there's been these rumors, obviously, of a sequel for a while. And I know Seth Grahame-Smith wrote a script, and I think someone else has written a script, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen or not.
Yeah. And what dawned on me was what was so refreshing about seeing this come to the stage is that everybody wants more from this world.
Yeah.
But a reboot, nobody wants that. A sequel, it's so risky, but to just reimagine everything on a stage and in a brand new format I think it's the coolest way to refresh an IP. It never would have dawned on me, but it's
I think the reason
cool.
we went there is I think because like we weren't that interested in writing. We're just putting the script on stage, and then but also
And to their credit, the producers were not interested in that either.
Yeah.
And because we love the movie and we think that script is so great, it was like to try to just approximate that would have felt silly, and like we're just doing a carbon copy. But I think the bigger thing also is that I don't know how you even do anything exactly like what Michael Keaton did,
Right.
and not just feel like you're just trying to do a pale imitation of that. And so for us, it was like taking what Beetlejuice is at its core. He's this kind of like lounge singer, kind of gross, you know what I mean? Like gross guy that who desperately wants people to like see him and be part of stuff, and then put that in a slightly different voice. So that, and then I think what's great about Alex Brightman's performance is that I don't think at any point do you feel like he's doing Michael Keaton.
No, definitely not.
It's his own Beetlejuice.
No, he has created his own thing completely.
And I think so. What I like about that is it's outside the uncanny valley of like, is this supposed to be
Exactly.
And you just immediately are like, oh, he's not. He's doing something different. Okay.
Yeah.
And their makeup tests supported that too. I mean, there were versions of this show where we try to look on Alex Brightman that was more the canonical Beetlejuice, and I am here to tell you, it was terrible.
Really? Did it not translate on a stage?
It did not translate on a stage.
Some of it is having to look at him for a whole show. Like again, he's in the movie for 12 minutes, and
Right.
and you aren't having to just literally watch him on.
Because he was
stage
so
in front of
gross
you.
looking?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I was him for Halloween last year. My girlfriend was Lydia.
Yeah.
And I had to do the green ivy or whatever, or the moss on his face and the mold. Yeah. It's
But that
pretty gross.
Halloween costume aspect of it is something that we were really worried about.
That's
at
right.
first because Beetlejuice is a very common Halloween costume. It's iconic in that sort of way.
Yeah, that was the
And,
interesting
like,
thing. Was the first time I saw him, I was like, oh, he's not actually competing with Michael Keaton. He's competing with everyone who's ever dressed up like Beetlejuice for Halloween.
Yeah.
And so that was why he's like, oh, we need our own look to separate him from all of that. Because
Makes
what you
sense.
don't want is to come see Beetlejuice and think of like, oh, it's my coworker Eddie.
Yeah, and thinking like, yeah, we did that last year. Ours was better.
Yeah.
Or like,
Right.
it has to be something. It has to be a new take.
And a lot of that is also our costume designer William Ivy Long, who made this great.
Yeah, it's
suits
obviously
for
a
them.
genius.
Yeah. Yeah, it had such a foot in the original iconic design, but it was completely
and they
different
went back
at the
to
same time.
like
That's
Tim
great.
Burton's
That's what I
early
hope it worked.
sketches.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
like they went deep into his into the Tim Burton archives for both set and costume.
Oh, that's cool. Was V. Neal involved in this production at all? She's the original special effects makeup artist who did
No.
Beetlejuice.
No, we didn't. I don't think we had access to any of the the original movie designers in particular, but we had access to sketches and portfolios and things like
Yeah.
that of things that
Yeah.
were. Yeah, I mean,
Some of the hairstyles and the wigs are also from Tim Burton sketches.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're tired of answering this question, but what has the response been from Tim Burton, if you've heard anything?
He has not seen the show, as far as I know.
He's on the Dumbo circuit
That's right.
right
He's
now.
been
Yeah.
in London and he was making
little
Dumbo, and then. But I don't know if he's coming to opening night or not.
I'm not sure. I know his
He definitely knows of
representatives
it
have
and
come
has
and seen
has
it.
given his blessing.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So I would love to sit right beside him while he watches that.
I would. That
so
would be
cool.
so comfortable. That would be great. You do that, and I'll hide in the mezzanine.
So what's next for you guys? Ghostbusters the musical? That's
right.
We're not
Ghostbusters.
legally allowed to
No.
discuss Ghostbusters. Yeah, Ghostbusters. That's we've
Marshmallow
actually.
Man explodes onto the audience.
Oh, that would be cool.
That'd be really cool.
Cover everybody in actual marshmallow.
It's going to be really expensive, so the rest of it will be very minimalist. The Ghostbusters will just be at a table in metal chairs, but then at the end, the Stay Puft Man will come on and explode all over the audience. So you'll get your money's worth.
It's like a one-room play with all the Ghostbusters talking. I can see it.
It's no
Like
exit.
dinner with-
Firehouse.
It's like dinner with
No exit.
Egon.
There's just people coming into the firehouse going, "That was crazy."
It's all
never actually
Shakespearean
see it,
acting.
yeah.
What ho! A ghost, a specter outside. Tell me
can
what
see it.
happened.
I can totally see it. So, yeah, what are you guys working on next? Are you not
I
at
am-
liberty to...
For theater right now, we have a couple things in the pipeline, but nothing that's like ready to announce. And then we're both doing television. Right now I'm working on a show for Comedy Central with comedian Rory Scovel that'll be out next year.
Oh, cool.
And Scott's working on
Castle Rock.
Very
and,
cool.
on
yeah.
Hulu.
I got a book out.
Oh, wow.
That's it's a YA novel called XL about a really short kid. For all your listeners, I'm not short. I'm very tall person. So I had to dig deep for this. No, I'm extremely short. And it's a novel about a short kid who like grows from 4'11" to 7 feet in a year.
Oh, whoa.
There's that, and Castle
Very
Rock
cool.
and some other.
And this is kind of a
stuff.
weird question. You guys are obviously working on multiple things, all of which are creative simultaneously, and they're all in different phases. How do you guys kind of project manage your projects?
Great question.
Do you use Excel?
Please
or
tell me the answer.
do you Evernote users?
It's
or-
literally waking up every day and going, "What do I have to have done by the end of today?
Got it.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Whatever it is, I'll do it."
You're basically asking two people who are falling down a long flight of stairs, like, how do you do this? How do you hit every stair on the way down? It's like, well, it's easy. It's happening right now. I'm falling down the stairs. Like that's
Yeah, very
It's
long
just-
days.
Yeah.
Very long days.
Got it.
But it's fun. I mean, you can't. It's hard to complain when you're getting to do what you want to do. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's just what we have been saying since we were 13, and now we get our wish, and like very, very tired.
Cool. And last question, any parting advice for people who want to do similar things to what you guys do, who want to write and, get creatively involved with productions, either on the stage or on the screen or
I
anywhere?
think for me, the thing would be, I think writing if you finish anything, you've done more than 90% of people who try to write. And so take solace and happiness in that, which means also finish it. Even if it's terrible, finish it.
Especially if it's terrible.
You can always
can't finish it.
You can't fix it
if it's not finished. Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. And then I also think find a group of people who you like their sensibility and you can share things with, because it's such a lonely thing and it's so isolating that you just need people that you can trust, and that you also don't feel giant pressure from to share things with in their, when they're not finished, and can help. And so I think if you can find your circle of friends, your circle of peers that you have that with, I think those are the keys to like getting better.
Yeah, people to fail with, people to
That's right.
feel comfortable failing with, and failing again and again and again until and enjoying that.
Yeah, I heard that's a huge part of it, is just kind of having a mastermind. Like when George Lucas was writing Star Wars, his best friends were Spielberg, Coppola,
That's right,
and Brian De Palma, and they would all read his scripts, and they all kind of molded it into what we know as Star Wars.
That's right, and they can get together and go like, no, don't do that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think you should, and like fight about it and all that.
Yeah.
All of those things that you just need that feedback, and you need those people that you trust.
Yeah.
Because that also keeps you going.
Right.
When like, I'm going to see them, I was supposed to do that.
Yeah. and once you know them and you understand their sensibility and you work together enough to understand that, then their voice is in your head a little bit. So when you try something new, you can ask yourself, it's like, oh, I know Anthony would hate. This is something Anthony would hate. Why? And then you decide, is it because it's just not his thing, or is it because it is bad and it just won't pass the test?
Right.
And then putting it through that is and having a lot of people like that is tremendously helpful. Because otherwise you're on your own, and what you will either do is just talk to yourself, or you will shut your stuff down because you sense something is wrong, but you can't articulate what it is, and you're afraid of what it is.
Right.
Once you articulate what's wrong, everything gets a lot less scary. It's writing and thinking something's wrong with this, but I don't know what it is, and then you eventually just stop. You just bail out, and you never get a draft.
Versus if you had a group of people, they got to be hard to find, though. No.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. I mean, I was lucky enough to get involved at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater and kind of like find people through that. But I think whether it's just taking a writing class and trying to find people that way, or just I think there's ways to, like, to me, I think a writing class just gives you either deadlines to make you write, but also people that are interested in the same thing. And it might take you a while to find people, but I just think that, like Scott said, finding people to fail with is, I think, the key to all creative arts.
It's the best thing in the world. It is just, and it does take a while to find.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of trial and error, and but any communities of artists, sometimes if they're even adjacent communities, you might find writers in places, you might find writers in an acting class if you wanted to, or a comedy class, or playing music with them. I mean, you're finding people that are creative and supportive, and weeding out the odd underminer, is very important.
Great. Awesome. Well, on that note, guys, it was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Huge congratulations on Beetlejuice.
Thank you.
So awesome. I was so blown away. And thank you for such a great time. I'm definitely going to go see it again multiple times.
It's great.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So let's dig into some of the key insights and pieces of advice from Scott Brown and Anthony King. Number 1, find a writing group. So a very common piece of advice for mastery in any domain is to have a mastermind group. If you've read Think and Grow Rich, you've probably heard this principle before. Having a like-minded group of peers who you can turn to give you feedback, inspiration, and share resources with is critical to success. This is probably most critical for writers. Multiple authors and screenwriters frequently have writing groups in which they have their work critiqued by others who they trust. Scott and Anthony credit this practice for enabling them to grow significantly as writers. Try to find or create your own writing group, even if it's just one person. For Stephen King, it's his wife. Number 2, get comfortable being mad. Scott and Anthony have been collaborators for years, and they claim that the ability to get super mad at each other and then not take it personally is key to their collaboration. Do they always agree on everything? No.
But to have a working, collaborative, professional relationship requires embracing and exploring conflict, which they do very comfortably. Number 3, right to the end of each idea. So that major plot point, spoiler alert, in Beetlejuice where Lydia does not meet her mom was a big decision to be made. They consciously did not address this, and it ultimately made the story better and more honest. This plot point was in earlier drafts of the script, and by exploring it fully and thoroughly, Scott and Anthony realized that it had to be taken out. Had they not explored this plot point, had they not written it all the way to the end and seen how it melded with the rest of the story, they always would have been tormented by wondering whether or not it belonged in the story. They always would have been imagining this scene that could have been in this potential storyline that could have made the musical way better. However, since they did write it all the way to the end, they were able to see that it didn't work. When writing a script or a story, certain plot points have to be explored to their very conclusion to know whether or not they fit into the larger story as a whole. Writers can only clearly see things like these retrospectively. In other words, you won't know what belongs in your story until you get to the very end of it. Scott even said, you can't fix it if it's not finished. So write all the way to the end, reevaluate, and then rewrite. Anyway, guys, once again, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with your friends and family on social media. And if you are in the tri-state area or considering a trip to New York, I implore you to go see Beetlejuice the Musical. It was a blast. It will not let you down, and it is just such a treat for fans. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys.